Well, hello, friend. This is John Hames, the host of Old Guard Audio. I'm so very glad you tuned in today. Have someone in mind that might enjoy listening to the show, especially a young person that needs to hear a conservative message. Tell them how to subscribe or send them to the About page. This will provide methods of subscribing to the show, and that is www.oldguardaudio.com/about. Let me know what you think of the show. Send me an email at john@oldguardaudio.com. And I'm praying that God will richly bless you and yours. Thank you again. This is John Hames.
So the CIA says that Russia did, in fact, attempt to sway the U.S. presidential election in favor of Donald Trump. And while most of the media is taking that statement as fact, we're pushing back and looking at least 5 problems with this claim. This is a reality check you won't see anywhere else. Well, by now you've heard that the CIA is sure that Russia did hack the DNC and John Podesta's emails with the intent of swaying the election toward Donald Trump. And predictably, here's how some politicians have responded.
The Russians are not our friends. It defies belief that somehow Republicans in the Senate are reluctant to either review Russian tactics or ignore them.
Our men and women in the intelligence community who gather and assess intelligence are very careful and very deliberate. And if they weren't, they wouldn't be in the positions that they occupy.
But what most media isn't doing is actually asking for evidence of these claims. I'm going to give you 5 problems with what the CIA is saying. Problem number 1, how the information was released in the first place, because the CIA did not officially release this information. Rather, anonymous sources inside the CIA leaked this conclusion to the Washington Post on Friday. And then another anonymous source leaked the same conclusion to the New York Times. From the Post, the CIA has concluded in a secret assessment that Russia intervened in the 2016 election to help Donald Trump win the presidency, rather than just undermine confidence in the U.S. electoral system. The Post goes on to report this. Intelligence agencies have identified individuals with connections to the Russian government who provided WikiLeaks with thousands of hacked emails, and both the DNC and John Podesta's email accounts. So here's the second problem here. These anonymous sources, they did not provide any evidence to support those statements. And by releasing the information anonymously, there's no one accountable to provide that proof. The third problem here, the CIA lies. Maybe this should have been the first problem. Not always, but I can give you a number of recent stories where that agency has made claims that have been proven untrue. There are many public examples, but just 2 recent ones. The Senate Intelligence Committee blasted the CIA in 2014 for an ongoing, quote, culture of misinformation, which they said has undermined the public's trust in America's intelligence leadership. Also, Democratic Senator Ron Wyden of Oregon said that, quote, that trust has been seriously undermined by senior officials' reckless reliance on secret interpretations of the law and battered by years of misleading and deceptive practices within the CIA. And what about that huge Senate report on CIA torture practices? Remember this? It was a 4-year, $40 million Senate report. It found that the CIA repeatedly lied about brutal techniques in the years after 9/11. So please excuse us if the public needs the CIA to do more than just leak anonymously its conclusion that Russia tried to sway the election. Oh, and by the way, the fourth problem here, even according to the Post article, those CIA investigators, they haven't even come to an agreement on the conclusion. Again, from the Post, there were minor disagreements among intelligence officials about the agency's assessment, in part because some questions remain unanswered. Well, what does that mean? What are those disagreements? And without providing that information, how can we trust that these disagreements are actually minor, since that's, of course, a relative term? And that leads us to our 5th problem. The fact that repeatedly Julian Assange, the founder of WikiLeaks, has said that the DNC leak was not a hack. It was information leaked to WikiLeaks from someone inside the DNC. Well, only days ago, a former British ambassador to Uzbekistan, Craig Murray, said that he has met the person who gave the DNC emails to Assange and to WikiLeaks, and he says it is not the Russians. Quote, I know who leaked them, Murray told the UK Guardian. I've met the person who leaked them, and they are certainly not Russian, and it's an insider. It's a leak, not a hack. The two are different things. So what you need to know is that on top of all of these questions is one fundamental issue that everyone is missing. The claim is that Russia decided to hack the election not by altering voting results, but by making public actual emails from the Clinton campaign and the DNC. Look, I have said this before and I will say it again. How bizarre is it that the argument is not that the Russians were trying to influence the election through lies or electronic voting, but rather the claim, if you really boil it down, is that the Russians swayed the election for Donald Trump by revealing the truth about the Clinton campaign and the truth about the DNC. That's Reality Check. Let's talk about that on Twitter. Russian hackers penetrated U.S. electricity grid through a utility in Vermont, U.S. officials say. That was the headline from the Washington Post on Friday. By now, you might have heard that these Russian hackers attempted to access the power grid in Vermont. The only problem with the story? It's not true. But this fake news story was published by the Post. And yet, among most media and social sites like Facebook, there is no outrage over this fake news. So what happened? Let's give it a reality check. So I've got about 3 minutes to explain, so let me give you the rundown. It was Friday night, 7:55 p.m., when the Washington Post ran its first article, claiming that Russian hackers connected to a high-level Russian government operation known as Grizzly Steep had penetrated the Vermont utility. The Post did not have even one single named source for this information and instead was relying on an anonymous source from Homeland Security. And yet that same evening, between 9:24 and 10:06 p.m., the Post updated the article to state that multiple computer systems at the utility had been breached. Quote, officials said that it was unclear when the code entered the Vermont utility's computers and that an investigation will attempt to determine the timing and the nature, it says, of the intrusion. Well, the article began to spread on social media, and it grew from 8 to 18 paragraphs. But as it grew, it did not include one single statement from the utility in question, which is why within an hour and a half of that first article being published, the utility company itself came forward, releasing this statement, which actually corrected the Post's article. They said, quote, we detected the malware in a single Burlington Electric Department laptop not connected to our organization's grid systems. We took immediate action to isolate the laptop and alerted federal officials of this finding. Okay, so did you get that? It was not the power grid. It was a single laptop not connected to the grid. But that laptop was still accessed by Russian hackers, right? Well, no, maybe not, and here's why. Burlington Electric said in a statement that the company, it detected a malware code used in the Grizzly Steep operation, but the malware in question is actually available for purchase online. That means anyone could have used it, or what is most likely here is that an employee using that laptop had accessed the website infected with malware. 5 days after blowing this story, the Post finally admitted it got it wrong, saying this. The Post initially reported incorrectly that the country's electric grid had been penetrated through a Vermont utility. After Burlington Electric released a statement saying that the potentially compromised laptop had not been connected to the grid, the Post immediately corrected its article and later added an editor's note explaining the change. Yeah, but that's really not true. See, the paper kept changing and amending the story with no editor's notes explaining what was being changed. And Forbes explains it like this. The following morning, nearly 11 hours after changing the headline and rewriting the article to indicate that the grid itself was never breached and that the hack was only an isolated laptop with malware, the Post still had not appended any kind of editorial note to indicate that it had significantly changed the focus of the article. So what you need to know is that Glenn Greenwald makes a great point when he says that journalists, especially in cases like this, must not simply accept what governments state as absolute truth. Remember, it was a DHS source who initially leaked the story. What likely happened here, someone from DHS tipped off the Post reporter about Russians hacking the U.S. power grid, and the paper decided to simply believe that source rather than take the basic journalistic step of checking the facts. It is precisely for these reasons that news organizations cannot simply accept anyone's word. Government, law enforcement, trusted sources, the average citizen, it doesn't matter, without verifying the basic facts. Because to not do so, well, that is the real definition of fake news. That's Reality Check. Let's talk about it on Twitter.
Well, there you have it. I'm so glad you stopped by the show today. Let someone know about the show, a youngster, a college age, a young adult, maybe the younger generation will hear something that makes sense to them and counteract the liberal propaganda they hear every day. You can help with the cost of producing the web host and the file storage at no cost to you. Just check out the Amazon links on the webpage, oguardaudio.com. If you make any purchase using those links, regardless of what item is being displayed, just click on the Amazon link and make a purchase that you need around the house. I'll get credit for it. It will sure help keep the show on the air. Thanks again. This is John Hames. May God bless. you and all of yours.